Hi everybody, Dan here. Let's talk about implementation-minded negotiations. There might be a question or two on the midterm, on the final from this screencast. I want to share with you some of the information I gleaned from interviewing the folks at Boeing and United Airlines regarding the very first 777. I want to remind you of how Turner Construction worked with the owner's architect or made an overture to them that was accepted. Also, I can share with you some information of how Jet Propulsion Labs implements a negotiation strategy, a long-term implementation-minded negotiation strategy with their subcontractors as they build space probes. And then I'll remind you a little bit about Technicolor and Airborne. So let's go to Boeing. A few years ago, Boeing was in competition with Airbus for a 2-engine passenger plane capable of transatlantic flight. United Airlines had plenty of 747s. They wanted something more economical, something actually a little smaller in terms of passenger capacity. Airbus already had the answer. They had the A350. It had been certified in Europe and in the US by the FAA as flying all over the world. Everybody loved it. And Boeing was about to design and build the 777. Now, you might think that Boeing would be at a huge disadvantage here, but their pitch to United Airlines was, tell us what you want, and we'll build it. We will design this plane for you. So this was a huge advantage for Boeing in a sense. On the other hand, United Airlines was in a hurry, and Boeing was forced to take a lot of risks and make a lot of promises to United Airlines in terms of certification in order to get this plane in flight when United Airlines wanted it. On the other hand, Airbus already had it, so the advantages worked both ways. But United Airlines did see an opportunity to get what it wanted. Sensing this, Boeing asked the United Airlines executive project manager to office at their Seattle plant. Come in, move in with us, watch us through every phase of the design, which meant that this gentleman from United Airlines would be, in a sense, you've heard the expression, you never want to be in the restaurant and see how the dish is made. You want to deliver it on your plate because it's two different impressions when you're back there and you're seeing how it's made. Well, it's a big risk on the part of Boeing to allow him to do that, and even to allow him in their, as they put it, their war room. This is the first time a non-Boeing employee was allowed to sit in on major strategic decisions. And you can imagine the kinds of things that the Boeing executives might want to talk about in private. But they're allowing this United Airlines guy a complete window, total transparency on all of their operations. Boeing did get the order. Now, it takes years for a 2-engine plane to be tested and approved for extended operations. The FAA is very risk adverse. You and I should be glad about that. In other words, you've really got to jump through a lot of hoops to get FAA certification. And that's one of the reasons why the United States, frankly, no brag, just fact, has the safest planes and the safest procedures. Anyway, it takes years. But Boeing promised delivery to United Airlines before the plane could be certified in the traditional manner. So, Boeing went to the FAA and said, what if we did this? And Boeing devised a torture test for the 777 and invited the FAA to monitor this test. And it was I don't have time to go into it now, but it was so extreme that you should be gratified. If you ever step into a 777 aircraft, you can be confident that you are flying something that has done the impossible. And the FAA, really out of a kind of morbid curiosity, the executives told me, decided to agree to Boeing's overture. I mean, if the plane could do what Boeing said it would be able to do with these tests, then it would get certification. So there's an example of reaching out to the other side and an implementation-minded negotiation mindset. We've already talked about the Broncos football stadium. I just wanted to remind you of how the relationships are. The architects represent the owner and are adversarial to the builder. Turner is the builder, and they offered to involve the architect by partnering with the architect. So now the architect in this relationship is no longer representing the owner, which means that Turner Construction is assuming all kinds of risks. If they make a mistake on the architectural side, they have to eat it. They cannot ask for change orders. Another thing that Turner did that was kind of unusual with the stadium was they invited all of the project managers from the major subcontractors to look at the critical path. The critical path scheduling means, critical path means one thing has to get done before another thing can begin. So you can imagine, just a simple example, you cannot, this is very simple, you cannot paint the exterior of a building until, until everything else is done within the walls of the exterior. So Turner asked all of these people, when can you get your portion of this done, assuming the timeline that we have? All of these major subs, electrical, cement, steel, all of them committed and bought in on the timeline. And so it was impossible for them to say at a later date, hey, we can't do it. Another thing Turner did to reach out to the other side, and I mentioned this in that other screencast, when they had to demolish the old Mile High Stadium, they invited police and fire and emergency services, not just from Denver, but if the Denver people, of course, they were trying to covet favor with the Denver officials, but if they wanted to bring in people from a national level, Turner agreed to that. And so they blew up that old stadium, and the emergency people practiced terrorist responses and rescue operations, courtesy of Turner. Turner lost, I think, 2 or 3 weeks of precious time allowing them to do this, but you can imagine how the emergency people and the fire department love Turner. And by the way, these agencies all have the power to slow down or even withhold permits. So it was a very smart thing that Turner did. On the other hand, Turner forgot to involve the other side with an implementation mindset when they discovered that the city of Denver had this design committee, which ended up making, some trouble for Turner because of what they wanted. Turner would have done a lot better to reach out to them at a much earlier date. I want to talk to you a little bit about Jet Propulsion Labs and a mission to Mars, the Odyssey Orbiter, that I profiled in one of my books. Now, a space probe has very, very limited margin. These things are not big. I mean, it's not like a big spaceship. We're not talking Star Trek. We're talking something that looks like it was built in your garage. Very small. And it has very limited margin. I talked to one project manager who negotiated with all of his teams. He has a team doing experiments on, is there water on Mars? One team is, looking for evidence of volcanic activity. So there are all these teams, and each team wants to do a lot of things. and the project manager negotiated with him, but withheld, never revealed his full margin. And that mission was a success. But another project manager on another mission at Jet Propulsion Labs handled it totally differently. He got in front of all of his teams and he revealed his entire margin. He said, this is all the weight we can carry. This is all the bandwidth. This is all the digital storage capacity, etc., etc. And he was telling the truth. And he created a marketplace where all of his team members could swap margin with each other. And his feeling was, look, they're the experts. They're the ones that will be doing the job. Let them hash it out. Another thing JPL did was not to do things their way. They usually do. Use, JPL protocol, everybody had to follow it. But when they worked with Lockheed Martin building this spacecraft, the timeline was so short that this same project manager for JPL decided to do it their way instead. They decided to use their forms, their procedures, everything their way to speed things up. I have to wrap this up. We've already talked about Airborne and Technicolor, how each one of them demanded quite a bit of reciprocity from each other in terms of responsibility. It was very, very risky on their part. But these are examples of implementation-minded negotiations. These are not deal makers. These are people that want to get the job done and know they will be working side by side for years to come on the project. Okay, thank you.